is a very interesting book. It has something very unique. Only those gathered to the Lord's name can understand. It is a book where there are godly people. It's a story about godly people, yet the word God does not appear in that book because those people were not in the right place. We are, by the grace of God, still there because it is the grace of God that sustains us and keeps us there. I would ask you first for the tolerance when it comes to the names. The reason is because those names that appear in the book are mostly names that are from our part of the world. So when I start reading them in English, I'm always affected. I feel I'm always affected by my background. So please, I ask your tolerance, especially that I spent this morning, about half an hour rehearsing the name to make sure that when I pronounce a name, you would understand which person I mean. The book of Esther, it's a story. I would like to say it for those who did not read, to refresh our memory. It's a story about a king. This king had a birthday, and during his birthday, he got drunk. And when he's drunk and became drunk, he asked that his wife, because she was very pretty, to have a catwalk and in front of his guests. But what an unbelievable request! But the wife did not agree and did not submit to that. She said, "I can't do that. I cannot show off my beauty in front of your guests." So he was very angry, and he had counsel of people around him, and they told him, "You can't keep her a queen. She has to be divorced." So he expelled her and looked for another wife. The person who got the choice was a lady, a young girl called Esther. She was brought up by her cousin, Mordecai, who was a very good man, a very pious man, and also he was a man who had dignity. And because he was not flattering his boss, Haman, or that superior, he was not flattering him, buttering him, and he wouldn't bow to him as a Jew, as an Israelite. Haman was very angry with him and was not satisfied by prosecuting him. He said, "I think that I will annihilate all the people that he comes from, just to quench my anger and my wrath." Sure enough, he he prepares a tree, a wooden cross, if you will, and he was going to put him on that cross. Timing is very important. We know that in our experience. If God did not control time, things would get out of hand. In the time that Mordecai discovers a plot to assassinate the king, in that moment, the king forgets to recompense him. He forgets about it completely. And when it was time for the Lord to remind him, Haman came in, and the king asked him, "Tell me how to recompense a man that I am pleased with." So Haman, being such a self-centered person, he said, "It must be me." So he exaggerated in that celebration of that person. And the king told him, "Okay, every word you said, do it to Mordecai." I feel sorry for Haman. What did he feel having to give and bestow on Mordecai, his enemy, what he said for himself? Anyway, fast forward, the king stops the decree to kill the people, and at the end, Mordecai is exonerated, and Haman is placed on the wooden cross that he prepared for Mordecai. This is the story. It's very important that I remind everybody with it before we start seeing bit by bit the Lord's plan as it is set. If we read Esther chapter 1, there are certain words that I would like to highlight. Chapter 1, verse 10. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Memun, Abgatha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king. When the king's heart was merry with wine, we know that the wine in the book speaks to us, in the scripture speaks to us about natural joy. And this man became drunk with the natural joy of the world. So it did not lead him for thanksgiving. On the contrary, he became merry only with the things of this world, and this drunkenness led him to ask for something really shameful, something that is against the nature of a man, to expose his wife. But this is the way with everybody that would be drunk with the joy of the world. But to bring Vashti, the queen, verse 11, before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. This goes against the nature of a man, of a husband, to show up his wife. But the Queen Vashti, of course, she refused to come at the king's commandment by the king, commanded by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. I want to stop here with the word anger. I confess that many times anger, temper gets the best of me. We have to be very careful as Christians, because when we are angry, my daughter studies neuroscience, she might correct me, the brain stops completely. And that's why later, after being angry and after the bitter fruit of anger comes out, we always regret. In Ephesians 4:26, it's written, be angry, but sin not. It's very difficult not to sin when you're angry. You say things, you do things, and then you regret it. I looked for the word wrath. It's more than angry. It's more than wrath. It is the same word that Cain felt, the same word that expressed in Genesis 4, when the wrath, the anger of Cain led him to kill his brother. It's the same word. I looked it up. I looked in the dictionary, Arabic and English. It's not only anger. It's a fire that comes in the person that led a brother to kill his brother. We have to be very careful with our emotion and not to give way to the destructive emotion that when it comes, it bears very bitter fruits. He went and he became very angry, and he could not think, and he submitted, or he listened to his aides, and his aides, of course, took the opportunity to, instead of putting peace, they said, you get her out, you do that, do this. No one, not one word of kindness about his queen. There was no love. There was only judgment. That's something very, very bad when it happens between husband and wife. I would like also to read that his friends magnified her action, and in verse 16 it says that, and Memucan answered before the king and the princess, Vashti the queen had not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. This is the word they had to say. No word of peace, no word of reconciliation. In verse 5 of the second chapter, the second person appears, the second hero of our story. Now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shemi, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Whom does this remind us of? Kish and a Benjamite. It reminds us of the first king of the first king of the people of Israel. He was, I don't know if there is a relation or not, but he was a Kish and he was Benjamin. And what a difference between that person, the king, who is an example of the flesh, and Mordecai, who was a real Israelite, a person who kept the precepts of the law and refused to bow to man. Two brothers, maybe coming from the same place, but what a difference between them. The 1 Samuel 9, chapter 9, verse 1 speaks to us about Saul the king. Anyway, there was a girl that he treated like his daughter. And in verse 7, and he brought unto Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful. When Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. Nice gesture that he took her in, and in the same time he treated her like a daughter and let her grow up beside the scripture. Verse 8. So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. I would like to concentrate in the word was brought. The word in Arabic shows that she had nothing to do with being brought. It was the hand of God behind the scene, pointing at that girl and bringing her to that place, because later, like a soap puzzle, she had to play a role in his plan. Sure enough, she had favor. Verse 9, and the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. Nothing is a coincidence. If we believe in coincidence, we would be miserable, because we would be always worried about tomorrow. We know that there is a hand of God. I speak this because of the time of Corona. We have to trust the Lord that his hand is controlling everything. He has a plan. He has a plan, and this plan will be carried out. Nothing is a coincidence. She was brought there because she had to play a certain role later. Maybe she did not know, but God knew. Verse 15 and verse 16. 15. Verse 15. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Hegai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. Not only the king, but she was kind. She knew how to carry herself, that she gained favor in the eyes, not only in the eyes of the king, but of every one who saw it. I think that this is from the Lord. If we as Christians in this world, especially if we are in a minority in some countries, we can gain favor by being righteous. Even at the beginning, if people mistake us or misunderstand us, after a while, they start to trust us. If we work diligently, we're disciplined, we are good in what we do, even those who are against us, one day we will gain favor in their eyes. The grace is always there, but I think that there is a certain duty that the Christian has to do and to carry out. The duty is to be upright, to have integrity, to gain trust in the eyes of his superiors and his subordinates. Of course, a Christian cannot gain and favor in the eyes of everybody. It's very difficult because some people will be always biased. But I'm talking about the majority. After a while, their heart will melt. Now, in verse 21, something happens. Remember when I told you that there was a plot of assassination against the king? In those days, when Mordecai sat in the king's gate, it was his shift, if you will. No coincidence. Two of king's chamberlain, Bigathan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king. And the king was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's names. They did not, most probably they did not readily believe the report, because there was an inquisition. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out the report was true. Therefore, they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. Now, here a very important thing happened. It couldn't be a coincidence. They were so busy in the inquisition and in carrying out the punishment, that they forgot to recompense Mordecai. It's a vital thing. It's a vital piece of information. It's a vital piece of the puzzle that they had to forget, because later we'll discover why they had to forget. Because if they didn't forget and they gave him something, the whole plan would have collapsed. The plan of God would have collapsed. They had to forget completely. So go to chapter 3. After these things, the king Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. Some people say that he might be a relative of the king. There might be correlation with the king of Amalek that Saul let go and forgave. I'm not sure, and I'm not a scholar, but it was said, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman. They felt that they can gain favor if they just do that to him. They butter him or flatter him. For the king had so commanded concerning him, but Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matter would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew, and a Jew does not bow to man. He bows only to God. Haman had wrath again, and his wrath was very manifest in verse 6. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shewed him, the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. That was the wrath that I spoke to you about, this person who was so full of himself that when he hated a person, it was not enough for him to destroy him, but he wanted to destroy the whole people. Chapter 4, when Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes and went out in the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When the news came that the Jews would be annihilated, they were completely devastated. Esther, of course, knew about it, and Mordecai showed some weakness. In verse 13, Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape the king's house more than the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy place at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. Some contradiction. In a way, in a moment, he's telling her, don't think that you will be spared. And in the same time, he's telling her, salvation will come from another route. Don't think that you can escape it. I think that we sometimes act in this way. We can trust the Lord when it comes to our salvation readily, but in the same time, we doubt his care about materialistic things or about his daily care. How could we be so confident when it comes to our salvation, and then in contradiction, we don't have enough faith to trust the Lord in our daily walk. We fear sometimes. We fear the weak, the humans. We fear and we care for things that are in His hands, in His control. Esther had a plan, and her plan was to save her people by inviting the king and Haman to her quarters, and to feed them and to make a banquet for them. In chapter 5, verse 5, then the king said, "Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther had said." So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. Esther had made through a large party for him. This filled Haman with even more pride, and he became even more full of himself, that he even said that, hey, even Esther cannot invite the king without me. But in verse 9, we see then when Haman went forth that day, joyful with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Many times we let small things, very small things, trifles, take away our joy, our enjoyment of important things. Many times little things take away the pleasure we should feel because of the most important things that we have. Verse 11, and Haman told them of the glory and of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things wherein the king has promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did not let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing. Nothing. It meant nothing to him, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Verse 14, then said Zeresh, his wife, with all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. This was the king, the wife's advice to her husband. Kill him, destroy him. A wife is there in the life of her husband to be his helpmeet, because a woman can see many things that a man that cannot, because they're different, and God made them different. The scripture teaches us that men are not better than women, but women have a different role. They can see things. Many times my wife, see things that I do not see. And when she points them to me, I surprise myself. How couldn't I see this? It's so obvious. It was only obvious because she pointed it out and she saw it from the first moment. This wife had an evil advice. She advised him to kill Mordecai just because he was angry with. I will start ending now because I do not want to take too much time, and also I want to give the opportunity for others to speak. But with your permission, I would like to speak about the event that happened in chapter 6. It's very important, and it explains many things. In chapter 6, on that night, could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. The king had a clown. The king had dancers. The king has a variety of methods of entertainment. But that day, for some reason, he asked for the book of Chronicles. Not a coincidence. Couldn't be a coincidence. And it was found written that Mordecai told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. Like we do sometimes, we take the Bible and we open it to see, and many times we read a verse that is very, very important for that moment or that situation we're going through. This is exactly what happened. When the king asked for the book of Chronicles, they opened without coincidence to the very page that it was written that those two people wanted to kill the king, and the king was spared because of the report of Mordecai. So what a coincidence. Two coincidences at the same moment. The first was going for entertainment because he was not sleepy, to read in the book of Chronicles, and then that very page is the one that was open. Very good. So, and the kid said, "What honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this?" If they told him we gave Mordecai that time 100 pieces of gold, he would say, "Oh, good, that's good." If they said we gave him a palace, he would have been satisfied, and the story would have ended here. But they told him, "Wait a minute, we forgot to recompense him. We didn't give him anything." I'm sure at that moment, if we would have asked Mordecai, "Would you be happy with 100 pieces of gold?" he would have said, "Yes, very much." A piece of land where you can build a home, he would have loved it. But God had another thing waiting for him, something better. Always, God's plan is better than our plan. God's planning is better than our planning. Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. Another coincidence, another split second that he comes in the same moment. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, who could be other than me? I am the man. I am the person that the king cannot have a banquet with his wife without me. Haman answered, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than myself? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal, which is set upon his head, and let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man with all whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Then the king said to Haman, make haste and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of that has spoken. Nothing can stop God's plan, can delay it. Nothing can. God has a plan in every life of his children. We are very dear to his heart. I am the first one that need to hear this. The Lord has a plan in everybody's, if every child of his, and he will never let anything interfere with his plan, especially those young ladies, young girls, and young men that are listening now in the beginning of their lives. You have to know the Lord knows everything that you're going through, all your cares, your fears of the future, what will happen, how will it be? Leave it to the Lord. Trust the Lord. And the Lord will carry out his plan because he controls the time. Look at the timing of even the sleep of the king was in the hand and the control of God. Insomnia that came to the king that day, it was God's doing. The book of Chronicles was God's doing. The page that was open was God's doing. Forgetting to recompense Mordecai, it was God's doing. Haman entering in the same moment, it was God's doing. Nothing can escape the Lord's plan, and it will be carried out, regardless of even you, even of the presidents that control this world, the world, nothing can stop it. Trust him to enjoy the ride. If you do not trust him, it doesn't mean that he will alter your destination. By grace, you will reach where he wants you to reach, but you will not enjoy the ride. Mordecai said something, and I would like to close with this thought. He said, we do not know how the way out will be, but we know that all things work together. All things and together. These are the two keys of that verse. All things, negative things, positive things, neutral things, they work together. They work together to fulfill and to carry out God's plan. Thank you for listening. I hope I did not stay too long, and God bless you. I invite others if they would like to comment.